The rain hammered the tin roof like 1,000 unspoken accusations, turning the dirt road into a river of mud that swallowed the tires of Lila's beat-up Chevy. She burst through the screen door, soaked to the bone, her eyes wild with the kind of question that had been brewing in her since she was old enough to notice the empty space beside my bed. "Mom," she said, voice cracking like thunder. "Why do you stare at the stars every night like they're hiding something from you?" I froze, the coffee mug slipping from my fingers to shatter on the pine floorboards, shards scattering like the fragments of a life I'd buried under layers of pretense. In that moment, the ghost I'd kept chained in the attic of my heart rattled her bars one last time, and I whispered the truth I'd never dared voice. Because she never came back from the war. That night in our creaky farmhouse on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Vermont, a town where maples bled red in fall and secrets festered like black mold in the cellars, Lila didn't press further. She was 18 now, all sharp edges and borrowed dreams, with her father's square jaw and a curiosity that could unravel a sweater in one pull. Harlan had been gone 3 years, taken by a heart attack in the mill, leaving me to raise her alone in this house that smelled of damp wood and regret. But as she dried her hair by the fire, stealing glances at me, I knew the dam had cracked. The story I'd locked away since 2003, when the world was still reeling from towers falling and wars blooming in desert sands, was seeping out. It started with Elowen, of course. Always with her. Elowen Hayes, with her laugh like wind chimes in a summer gale and eyes the color of the green mountains after rain. We met in the summer of '99, both of us 26 and adrift in the haze of post-college limbo. I'd come back to Willow Creek after a failed stint in Burlington, chasing architecture degrees that felt as flimsy as the blueprints I'd sketched for buildings that would never rise. Aspen Whitaker, that's me, daughter of a lumberjack father who taught me to measure life in board feet, and a mother who baked pies to apologize for silences. I worked at the local library then, shelving stories of loves that dared win the world, while the world outside dared little at all. She rolled into town on a battered Harley, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder, looking for work at the auto shop on Main Street. Elowen was from Oregon, all wild Pacific Coast salt in her veins, with a tattoo of a lighthouse peeking from her sleeve. A beacon for ships lost in fog, she'd say later, when we'd lie tangled in sheets that smelled of pine and possibility. Our first collision was literal. I was crossing the street with an armload of returns when her bike sputtered to a halt at the light. She kicked the stand down, helmet tucked under her arm, and grinned like she'd been waiting for me her whole life. "You look like you could use a ride," she said, nodding at the books threatening to topple. I laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in months, and handed her the price of salt, the spine cracked from too many secret readings. "Only if you promise not to judge the plot," I replied, and just like that, the air between us hummed with something electric, forbidden. Willow Creek wasn't kind to sparks like ours. It was a place of white-steepled churches and Friday night potlucks, where folks measured worth in property lines and bloodlines, and anything that deviated from the script, man and wife, 2.5 kids, Sunday sermons, was whispered about over coffee at the diner. My parents had drilled it in, duty first, desires second, but Elowen didn't care for scripts. She fixed engines by day and played guitar on her porch at night, drawing me over with notes that wove through the dusk like invitations. Our first real night together was under a canopy of stars, on a quilt spread by Black River, the water murmuring secrets as old as the hills. She traced the constellations with her finger, naming them after lovers from myths I'd only read about. "Orion's belt," she said, her breath warm against my neck. "That's where we hide the wild parts of ourselves." When her lips found mine, it wasn't a question. It was a reclamation. Soft, insistent, tasting of blackberries we'd picked that afternoon. In that kiss I tasted freedom, sharp and sweet, and for the first time the weight of expectation lifted, if only for a breath. But freedom in Willow Creek came with barbs. Whispers started small. The librarian with the Oregon drifter, seen holding hands at the county fair. My mother, Evelyn, cornered me in the kitchen one evening, her apron dusted with flour from apple crisps that no longer sweetened anything. "Aspen honey, folks are talking. You know how it is here, roots run deep, but so do the judgments." I wanted to scream that my roots were twisting toward the light, toward Elowen, but I swallowed it down, nodding like a good daughter. Elowen felt it too in the sidelong glances at the garage, the way old Mr. Hargrove would mutter about city influences when she handed him his keys. Yet we carved out our world in stolen moments. Drives up Route 100 to Stowe, where we'd hike trails that led nowhere but to each other, her hand in mine as leaves crunched underfoot, the world fading to the rhythm of our shared silence. By winter we'd moved in together. A tiny cabin on the edge of town, heat from a wood stove and dreams from a shared bed. She taught me to mend what was broken. Carburetors, hearts, the fragile machinery of hope. I'd sketch floor plans for a life unbound. Open kitchens for laughter, wide windows for truth, while she strummed songs about horizons we'd chase someday. We'll head west, she'd say, her head on my lap, to where the ocean meets the sky and no one counts the waves. Love like ours was a quiet revolution, blooming in the frost-kissed mornings when she'd wake me with coffee and kisses, her fingers lingering on the curve of my shoulder like she was memorizing a map. But revolutions have fault lines. September 11th shattered the glass of our fragile peace. The towers fell, and with them the illusion of safety. Elowen watched the news in silence, her jaw set like the cliffs she'd grown up climbing. She was ex-Army reserves, a medic who'd enlisted young to pay for trade school, discharged after a knee injury in training. But the calls came, recruiters, duty's long shadow, and she answered. "I can't just sit here," she told me one night, the fire dying to embers as snow piled against the panes. "People are hurting. I know how to help." Her eyes held the weight of 1,000 unsaid goodbyes, and I saw the pull. Not just patriotism, but the ache to prove she belonged, to outrun the labels that clung like burrs, dyke outsider, the woman who stole the librarian's heart. I begged her to stay. We argued in the cold kitchen, voices echoing off walls that suddenly felt too close. "This town's poison enough without you chasing ghosts in the sand," I said, tears freezing on my cheeks. She cupped my face, thumbs brushing salt away. "It's not ghosts, Aspen. It's purpose. And when I come back, we'll build that house by the sea." Her kiss was a promise, fierce and fleeting. But promises in wartime are paper lanterns, beautiful until the wind rises. She shipped out in January 2003. The dead of winter mirroring the hollow in my chest. The bus station in Burlington was a blur of gray. Fatigues crisp against her skin, duffel at her feet, my arms around her like I could anchor her to Vermont soil. "Write me every day," she whispered, her forehead to mine. "Tell me about the maples budding, the way the river sings in spring." I nodded, throat too tight for words, and watched the bus pull away, taillights fading into the storm. That night, alone in our cabin, I burned the first letter I'd written, too raw, too pleading, and started over, folding love into envelopes like fragile birds. The months blurred into a monochrome ache. Letters came sporadic, postmarked from bases in Kuwait, then the blur of Iraq. She wrote of dust storms that choked the sun, of soldiers with eyes like hollowed oaks, of quiet nights under foreign stars where she'd hum our songs to keep the dark at bay. I replied with snapshots of home. The library's new wing, Lila's mother, Harlan's first wife, visiting from Boston, though by then Harlan and I were circling each other in polite widowhood pretense. My parents urged me to move on, their concern laced with relief that Elowen's absence might straighten my path. Willow Creek watched, waiting for me to fold back into its grid. Summer brought the first fracture. A call from the Red Cross. Elowen missing in action after an ambush near Fallujah. The line went static and so did the world. I drove to the cabin that night, rain slicking the roads, and sat on the porch until dawn, her last letter clutched in my fist, ink smudged with "I love you" like a wound. Search parties, they said. Hope, they lied. Weeks turned to months and the official word came. Presumed dead, body unrecovered in the rubble. I didn't scream. I folded the flag they sent, stars mocking the night sky, and boxed her things. The guitar, the lighthouse ink, the quilt stained with blackberry juice. Grief is a thief, silent and thorough. It stole my sleep, my sketches, the color from the hills. Harlan found me there at the library counter, staring at a book on wartime romances that ended in reunions. He'd lost his wife to cancer 2 years prior, leaving Lila with a father who built furniture to fill the quiet. "Let me help," he said, his hand steady on mine. Not like Elowen's fire but a hearth's warmth. We married in a civil ceremony that fall. Me in a dress that hid bruises of the heart. Him with eyes full of second chances. It was survival, not salvation. A pact against the town's pitying stares. A shield for the secret I carried like a stone in my pocket. Lila came to live with us full-time after that. A 12-year-old whirlwind of questions and braids, calling me Mom, with a hesitation that softened over time. Harlan was kind, steady, building us a life of pot roasts and PDA meetings. But at night, when the house settled into snores, I'd slip to the attic, our old cabin attic, salvaged when we moved to the farmhouse, and unfold Elowen's letters, tracing her script like Braille for the blind. She never came back. I'd whisper to the rafters, the words a mantra against the lie of my wedding band. Years layered on like dust. Lila's graduations, Harlan's promotions at the mill, the slow thaw of Willow Creek toward the world beyond its borders. Gay marriage passed in Vermont in '09. A ripple we felt but didn't chase. I volunteered at the VFW, hearing stories of losses that mirrored mine but never matched its shape. The love unspoken, the widow without a flag to drape. Lila grew into a young woman with her mother's fire and her father's quiet, dating boys from the high school team, oblivious to the undercurrents that shaped her home. Until that rainy night, when the question cracked the facade. She sat across from me at the scarred oak table, steam rising from mugs of chamomile like ghosts from the grave. "You've never talked about Dad's first wife much," she started, tentative. "But it's more than that, isn't it? The way you and Dad were. Comfortable but not. Like you were waiting for someone else." Her eyes, so like Harlan's, held no accusation, only the ache of piecing together a puzzle with missing edges. I looked out the window where lightning forked over the hills, illuminating the river like a vein pulsing with memory. The truth spilled then, slow as sap from a tapped maple. I told her about Elowen. Not the sanitized version I'd rehearsed in nightmares, but the raw one. The Oregon girl who fixed more than engines, who taught me that love wasn't a ledger of duties but a wild river carving its own path. Lila listened, chin in hands, as I described the cabin nights, the letters yellowing in the attic, the war that swallowed her whole. "She was my heart," I said, voice steady for the first time in decades. "And society said that heart had no place beating here. So I hid it. Married your father to keep the wolves at bay. The town's, my family's, my own shames." Tears tracked her cheeks, not for pity but recognition. "That's why you never pushed me to date right," she murmured. "You knew what it was to love against the grain." We sat in the hush after, the rain easing to a patter, and for the first time, the attic felt less like a tomb and more like a threshold. Lila reached across the table, her hand over mine, Harlan's ring glinting like a relic, and said, "Tell me more." "All of it." Dawn crept in, painting the kitchen gold, and I began, words flowing like the Black River in thaw, unearthing a life I'd thought drowned. But truths unearthed stir sediments. The next week, Lila told her best friend at the diner. Innocent, a bridge to understanding, and by Friday the whispers returned, evolved but no less venomous. Mrs. Hargrove, ancient now but sharp as ever, cornered me in the produce aisle. "Heard about your friend from the war. Shame you couldn't keep such things private, Aspen. Harlan deserved better." Her words landed like stones in still water, rippling out to my parents' doorstep, where Evelyn left voicemails laced with scripture and sorrow. "We raised you better," she said, voice trembling. "This town's changing, but some things, they break families." Lila bore the brunt at school. Taunts from boys who'd once chased her smiles, questions from girls who saw her as tainted by proxy. She came home one evening, backpack slung low, and hurled it against the wall. "They call me the Dyke's daughter," she spat. "Like it's a curse. Is that what you lived with, Mom?" Hiding to breathe, I pulled her close, her sobs soaking my shirt, and in that embrace, I saw Elowen's ghost not as a specter but a mirror, the same fire, the same fight against the cage of expectation. The fracture deepened when my brother, Theo, drove up from Brattleboro, face thunderous under his trucker cap. He'd always been the family's enforcer of normalcy. 2 kids and a wife who baked like mother. "You're poisoning her, Aspen," he said over coffee that tasted of ash. "Spilling your choices to a girl who needs stability." Dad would roll in his grave. I met his gaze, the one I'd avoided for years. "Dad rolled long before this, Theo. He chose silence over me. I'm done choosing it for Lila." He left in a huff, tires spinning mud, but his words lingered like smoke, igniting doubts I'd banked since Elowen's letters stopped. Nights grew restless. I'd climb to the attic, Elowen's guitar dusty in its case, and strum chords that echoed hollow. Lila joined me sometimes, her fingers tentative on the frets, learning the songs that had bound us once. "Play the one about the lighthouse," she'd ask, and I'd oblige, voice cracking on lyrics of beacons in the fog. Through her, I glimpsed redemption, not erasure but reclamation. Willow Creek shifted subtly. The librarian gig turned to community outreach, where I'd host book clubs on hidden histories, voices like ours finally shelved in plain sight. Yet the past clawed back. A package arrived unmarked, postmarked from Oregon, Elowen's sister Mira, enclosing dog tags unearthed from a veteran's locker, engraved with her name and a date I'd memorized. Enclosed note. She spoke of you always. Said you'd build the house by the sea. I clutched them, metal cold as the river in winter, and wept for the what-ifs. Lila found me there, tags glinting in lamplight. We could go, she said suddenly. West. Start fresh. Honor her that way. The idea took root, a sapling in cracked soil. Harlan's life insurance had left us solvent, the farmhouse a tether I no longer needed. But leaving meant facing the town's gauntlet, goodbyes laced with judgment, my parents' pleas for reconciliation on their terms. Evelyn arrived unannounced, her hands wringing a handkerchief like a flag of truce. Don't do this, Aspen. Stay. Be the daughter we know. I showed her the tags, the letters, the guitar scarred by time. This is the daughter you never knew, Mother. But I'm done pretending. She left with tears, no scripture this time. Only a hug that lingered like forgiveness half-formed. Packing was a ritual of release. Boxes of Harlan's tools donated to the mill, Lila's yearbook stacked for the road. The town farewell was a potluck hybrid. Warm pie from allies, cold shoulders from holdouts. Mrs. Hargrove even nodded, her eyes softer. Life's too short for grudges, she muttered, handing me a jar of preserves. As we loaded the Chevy, dawn breaking over the hills, Lila slid into the passenger seat. Map unfurled to Route 100 West. To the sea. I asked key in ignition. She grinned, Elowen's echo in her smile. To wherever the river leads. The drive unspooled like a film reel. Vermont's greens yielding to New York's sprawl. Then Pennsylvania's rolling farms, each mile shedding the weight of Willow Creek. We talked through it all, Elowen's stories, Harlan's quiet strengths, the loves we'd yet to claim. Lila confessed her own secrets. A crush on a girl from art class, fears of following my shadowed path. But you showed me it's okay to burn, she said, hand on mine over the gearshift. To love loud even if it scars. Oregon welcomed us with salt air and fog-shrouded cliffs. Myra's cottage a lighthouse of its own, wooden beams, windows framing the Pacific's endless roar. We bought a fixer-upper in Cannon Beach. Me sketching blueprints anew. Lila enrolling in community college for graphic design. Nights we'd walk the shore, waves erasing footprints, Elowen's tags on a chain around my neck, glinting like stars reclaimed. No grand reunions, no tidy bows, just the human ache of moving forward, scars as signposts. One evening as sunset bled crimson into the sea, Lila paused by a tide pool, mirroring my old stargazing. You came back for her in a way, she said. By living true. I nodded, the war's shadow thinning to dusk. Society's chains had rusted, but the real freedom was this. A daughter who asked, a love remembered, a horizon unbound. Elowen hadn't returned from the sands, but in the salt wind, I heard her hum wild waiting hole. The salt clung to our skin like a second language, teaching us the cadence of waves that crashed without apology. Cannon Beach unfolded in layers. Driftwood sculptures on the shore, galleries tucked into clapboard shops, the haystack rock standing sentinel like Elowen's lighthouse etched in memory. Our cottage, a sagging Victorian with peeling blue paint, became a canvas, hammered floors, walls papered in sketches of rooms that breathed. Lila dove into her classes, charcoal sketches blooming with the boldness she'd inherited, while I took a part-time gig restoring old books at the local archive, fingers tracing faded inks that whispered of lives long parallel to mine. Mira became family fast, her Oregon drawl a bomb, eyes crinkling with stories of Elowen as a girl chasing tide pools and dreaming of skies wider than the coast. She'd climb those cliffs, Mira said one fog-misted morning over clam chowder, yelling to the gulls like they were old friends, said the sea was the only thing honest enough to roar back. We'd pore over photos then. Elowen at 16, surfboard under arm, grin defiant. At 22 in fatigues for basic, saluting with mischief. Each image peeled back the myth I'd built, revealing the woman who'd chosen war not for glory, but to mend what bombs broke, bodies, spirits, the frayed edges of a nation unraveling. But roots, even transplanted, remember their soil. Letters from Willow Creek arrived like autumn leaves. Evelyn's script shaky, Theo's blocky with reluctance. Town misses you, Mother wrote. Lila's aunt sends quilts. Underneath the pull. Come home, make amends, let the river of time smooth the stones. I replied with postcards of crashing surf, captions light but laced. Waves here carry stories too. Lila intercepted one from her old friend, now at college in Boston, words careful. Heard about your mom's big reveal. Kinda badass. Miss you though. She framed it on her easel, a talisman against the what-ifs. Freedom tasted of possibility, but it curdled with echoes. Dreams woke me some nights, Elowen's voice calling from dust-choked streets, her hand reaching through sandstorms I couldn't breach. I'd slip to the widow's walk, overlooking the Pacific's black expanse, and finger the tags until they warmed like skin. Lila found me there once, sketchpad in hand, capturing the moon's silver path on water. It's like her, isn't it? She said, nodding at the sea. Endless, even in the dark. We talked then of Harlan, not the shield but the man. His laugh over bad puns, the way he'd carve Lila's initials into table legs as love notes. He knew, she admitted. About Elowen. Saw it in your eyes at night. Said it made you braver. That bravery tested us come spring, when Lila's crush materialized. Jordan, a barista with cropped hair and a tattoo of ferns curling up her arm, met at a poetry slam in Portland. They started slow. Coffee runs, beach bonfires where verses flew like sparks. But Lila's hesitation mirrored mine once, fears of small-town scars reopening in this new soil. What if it's just a phase? She asked, pacing the kitchen as rain drummed the roof. Or worse, what if it's real, and the world still bites? I set down my tea, the ceramic warm as resolve. The world bites because it's scared, honey, of what it can't box. But you? You're the unboxable kind. Like Elowen. Like me finally. She kissed Jordan under a canopy of Sitka spruce that May, tentative then fierce, and came home glowing, salt-kissed and alive. Watching them, hands linked on the porch swing, I felt Elowen's absence not as void but echo, love's lineage passed like a flame. Mira hosted a barbecue to celebrate, grilling salmon over driftwood fires, the air thick with laughter and sea smoke. To the women who roar, she toasted, glass raised, and we drank to ghosts who lingered in the cheers. Yet the past's tide pulled relentless. A call from Theo shattered a July afternoon. Mother ill, pneumonia gripping her lungs like regret. She wants you, he said, voice gruff. Before it's too late. Lila and I packed in hours, the Chevy groaning under duffels, west to east a reversal of our flight. The drive east was a montage of heartlands. Golden plains of Nebraska, Appalachia's misty folds, each mile tightening the coil in my gut. Lila sketched roadside diners, her lines looser now, but her questions sharper. Will you forgive them? Or is this just duty's last chain? Vermont greeted us with chill rain. The hills a palette of russet and gold. The farmhouse stood sentinel, porch light flickering welcome. Theo met us at the door, beard grayer, hug awkward but real. She's weak, he said, leading us to the bedroom where Evelyn lay, tubes snaking like accusations. Her eyes faded blue lit at the sight of us. My girls, she whispered, hand frail in mine. I sat vigil those days, Lila fetching broth, Theo hovering with unspoken sorries. Stories flowed then, not mine but hers. A youth stifled by her own mother's edicts. A marriage to father built on silences she'd mistaken for strength. I saw it in you, she confessed one dusk as leaves tapped the pane. The hiding. Thought I was saving you from it. Forgiveness came in fragments. A shared quilt pieced from Elowen's scraps. Evelyn's fingers tracing the stitches. She sounds fierce, Mother said of the letters I read aloud, voice steadying with each page. Theo listened too, his scoff softening to nods. War took enough, he muttered. Shouldn't take truth too. Lila bridged us, her sketches of Cannon Beach pinned to the wall, horizons calling. When Evelyn rallied enough for a walk in the orchard, cane tapping apples fallen like regrets, she squeezed my arm. Go build that house, Aspen. For all of us who couldn't. We left a week later, Mother stronger, promises exchanged like heirlooms. The drive west felt lighter, burdens redistributed. Back in Oregon, the cottage hummed with plans. An addition for Myra's visits, a studio for Lila's art. Jordan moved in part-time, her presence a quiet revolution. Dinners of foraged mushrooms, nights of board games where laughter drowned old doubts. Autumn brought the high tide of reckoning. A letter from the Department of Defense, yellowed envelope heavy as stone. Remains identified, Elowen's dog tags a match, burial honors offered in Arlington. The words blurred, salt mixing with ink. Mira arrived that night, arms full of takeout we ignored, the three of us, Lila included, sifting memories like beach glass. She'd hate the fuss, Mira said, but we planned anyway. A service in Willow Creek, then scattering on the Pacific, ashes to merge with the sea she'd loved. The flight east was solemn, Lila's hand in mine through turbulence. Vermont's winter bit early, snow veiling the cemetery in white forgiveness. Townsfolk gathered, Hargrove's widow with a poinsettia, library patrons with books of poetry. Harlan's old crew from the mill stood shoulder to shoulder, hats in hands. Mother, bundled in shawls, read a psalm reworked. Though I walk through valleys of shadow, I fear no silence, for love endures. Theo spoke next, voice cracking. Elowen Hayes fought for us all, soldiers, sisters, the unseen. She came home today. We laid her to rest under a maple, earth soft with thaw. Then drove the coast road west, urn in the glovebox like a heartbeat. Cannon Beach's cliffs loomed welcoming, waves a chorus. At the overlook, wind whipping our coats, Lila and I scattered the ashes, gray motes dancing on foam. To the sea, I whispered, Elowen's promise fulfilled. Mira joined, then Jordan. Hands linked in a circle unbroken. As dusk fell, stars pricking the sky, Lila turned to me. She came back, Mom. Through you. In that circle, society's chains, class whispers, gender edicts, the war's cruel arithmetic, felt like relics rusted by time and tide. Love, it turned out, wasn't a war to win but a wave to ride. Crashing, receding, reshaping the shore. We drove home under moonlight, the cottage aglow, and for the first time the stars weren't hiding, they were calling us home. Winter and Cannon Beach wrapped the world in woolen grays. The ocean's roar a constant underscore to the quiet revolutions within our walls. The cottage, with its fresh coat of seafoam paint and windows thrown wide to salt breezes, became a sanctuary, not just for Lila and me, but for the strays we gathered. Jordan's poetry circle spilling onto the porch with thermoses of cider, Myra's weekly chess matches where she'd crow victory over my rook like Elowen once had. Life layered on, soft as sea glass smoothed by relentless tides, but beneath the calm undercurrents stirred. Reminders that healing is not linear, but a spiral circling back to touch old wounds. Lila's art bloomed fierce that season. Her canvases, propped in the garage studio we'd hammered together from salvaged driftwood, captured the coast's duality. Cliffs jagged against foam, figures entwined in fog-shrouded embraces that echoed Elowen's silhouette against mine. One piece, Beacon's Echo, sold at a Portland gallery opening, a woman on a rock outcrop, arm extended to a horizon blurred by mist, priced at $500 that she funneled straight into our Horizon Fund, a jar of beach-worn coins for whatever wild whim called next. Jordan beamed beside her that night, fingers laced, whispering encouragements that made Lila's cheeks flush like dawn on water. You're unstoppable, she'd say, and in her eyes, I saw the mirror of my own youth, tentative steps into a love that society still eyed askance, though Oregon's winds carried less venom than Vermont's. For me, the archive job unearthed archives of the heart. Dusty ledgers from the 40s chronicled Willow Creek's war widows, women in victory gardens, ration books stamped with losses, but none like mine, the invisible ink of forbidden grief. I started a project there, digitizing letters from homefront lovers. Wives to husbands, yes, but tucked in margins, sisters to sisters, friends whose codes masked deeper bonds. One evening, sorting a box from 43, I found a bundle tied with twine correspondence from a nurse in the Pacific to her dearest companion in Boston. Words veiled in garden metaphors. The roses bloom fierce without you, but the thorns remind me of your touch. My hands trembled, Elowen's script overlaying the page, and I photocopied it all, starting a binder I called Unsent Symphonies. Lila caught wind, of course. Our lives now an open book, pages turning together. Turn it into something, she urged over breakfast burritos, avocado smearing her chin. A exhibit. Voices like Elowen's screaming quiet. The idea ignited, a spark to Elowen's memory. We partnered. Her visuals, my narratives, mirror-sourcing veteran contacts from Oregon's roles. By spring, tides of telling took shape. A pop-up in a seaside warehouse, walls hung with canvases and letters, audio loops of waves mingling with recited missives. Opening night drew a crowd. Artists in berets, vets with canes, a smattering of Cannon Beach locals who'd heard whispers from Myra's garage band. As guests milled, wine glasses clinking like buoys, a woman approached my station, mid-40s, salt and pepper braid, eyes sharp as gulls. I'm Riley Tate, she said, extending a hand callous from boat ropes. Served with Elowen in '03. Medic unit. Fallujah sector. Time stuttered, the room's hum fading to her voice's low tide. She'd been the one to pull Elowen from the convoy wreck, dust-caking wounds, last words a murmur. Tell Aspen. The sea's waiting. Riley had tried. Letters forwarded. But addresses lost in my whirlwind remarriage. Now here, bearing a journal Elowen had pressed into her care. Pages of sketches, desert florals amid tactical notes, and at the back, a floor plan for our dreamed house. Open rafters, sea view porch, labeled for A and E. Unbound. I clutched it. Ink blurring under tears, Lila at my elbow, Jordan hovering protective. Riley stayed, sharing tales over folding chairs. Elowen's guitar strummed in bunkers to soothe shell-shocked kids. Her defense of a queer private against brass backlash. Fist to table. We bleed the same, sirs. She was the unit's north, Riley said, pointing us home when the maps lied. That night, back at the cottage, we pored over the journal by lantern light, Mira toasting with whiskey. To the Unbound. Lila sketched its pages into her next series, Jordan penning a poem that wove journal lines into verse. In Sanskrit, we build /rooms for ghosts to dance /windows wide as Y. But revelations ripple stirring shallows. News of the exhibit reached Willow Creek via Burlington paper. Theo calling post-haste. Mother's proud but the town's buzzing. Hargrove's kin called it revisionist. You stirring ghosts again. His tone held less bite, more weariness, the spiral touching him too. Evelyn followed with a package. Father's old compass engraved true north and a note. For your symphonies. Love guides truer than maps. I hung it on the studio wall, needle quivering toward west. Summer swelled with swells, Lila and Jordan's first road trip to Crater Lake. Returning sun-kissed with tales of Caldera blues deeper than sorrow. I joined Mira on fishing charters, lines cast into currents that tugged like memory, hauling cod that tasted of salt victory. Yet solitude crept in evenings, journal open on my lap, Elowen's hand in pencil lines. A chair for two by the hearth, alcoves for books we'd read aloud. I'd wander the beach then, tags around neck, whispering amendments to our blueprint. Room for Lila's laughter, Jordan's verse, Myra's checkmates. The undercurrent crested in August, a storm front rolling in from the Pacific, winds howling like unmailed letters. Lila came home from a gallery run, face ashen, Jordan trailing with storm cloud eyes. Someone slashed my tires, she said, voice small. Left a note. Go back to your unnatural nest. The words landed like debris, Vermont's echoes in Oregon ink. We called the sheriff, a soft-spoken woman with a rainbow pin on her badge, who took statements with quiet fury. Hate's tide rises with the full moon here too. We'll watch. But the damage lingered, Lila's confidence cracking like shells underfoot. That night as thunder rumbled, we gathered in the living room. Fire crackling, journal open like a shield. Jordan read her poem aloud, voice steadying the air, while Mira plotted countercharms. Community watches, art workshops for queer youth. I traced Elowen's floor plan, adding a turret for vigils. She fought bigger storms, I said, and Lila nodded, chin lifting. So do we. Dawn broke clear, tires replaced by a neighbor's garage free with a wink. For the symphonies. The incident scarred, but it steeled us, turning vulnerability to vein of ore. Fall brought harvest. Tides of telling toured to Portland, drawing crowds that spilled into streets, voices amplifying. Vets sharing shelved loves, elders unburdening coded diaries. Riley became a fixture, her boat a floating salon for story swaps. Lila's series sold out, funding the horizon jar to overflow. One crisp evening as leaves turned amber on madronas, she pulled me to the widow's walk. Jordan asked me to move in. Full-time. Portland loft. Her eyes searched mine, joy laced with fear. The pull of nests new. You're ready, I said, hugging her fierce. Build your Unbound. She left in November. U-Haul loaded with canvases and cat. Jordan's truck tailing like promise. The cottage echoed at first, but Mira filled gaps with chess and chowder. Riley with rigging lessons. I finished Elowen's blueprint, submitting it to a coastal architect, pro bono, for a women's shelter in Seaside. Unbound house, rooms for mending, windows to the sea. Ground broke in December, shovels turning soil like pages. New Year's Eve, snow dusting the cliffs, I stood on the beach alone, tags in palm, waves erasing the year's script. Elowen's voice rode the wind. Roar back. Society's tides ebbed, but the human heart, class-bound, gender-fenced, war-scarred, learned to swim. In the foam's retreat I saw our house rising. Not just walls but witness to loves that endure unbound. The new year dawned with a clarity sharp as January frost, the Pacific's horizon a line drawn in ink that refused to blur. Unbound house rose frame by frame on seaside's edge, its skeleton against the sky a testament to blueprints born in desert journals and attic whispers. I volunteered on-site weekends, hammer in hand beside carpenters, women mostly, from the local trades co-op, their laughter ringing like bells over sawdust clouds. Riley captained the crew, her commands crisp as nautical flags. Brace that joist, loves need strong bones. Mira dubbed it Elowen's legacy. Plaque pending, and each nail driven felt like staking claim to the freedoms we'd clawed from silence. Lila thrived in Portland, her loft a hive of half-finished canvases and half-read zines, Jordan's poetry chapbooks stacked like kindling. Weekend visits brought chaos. Brunches of mismatched mugs, hikes to Multnomah Falls where mist veiled their linked hands. Sold another Echo, she'd report. Check pressed into my palm for the shelter fund. For the turrets. Her confidence swelled, but so did the subtle storms. Gossip from art scenes where old guard critics sneered at queer coastal kitsch. Dates interrupted by sideways stares in hipster cafes. It's not Willow Creek, she'd say, but the tide's still there lapping. I'd nod, sharing Riley's tales of unit ribbing turned to reluctant respect. Elowen's way of turning barbs to bridges. Back in Cannon Beach, solitude suited me. A quiet companion after years of performative pairs. Mornings I'd brew coffee strong as resolve, journal open to sketch addendums. A communal kitchen for shared suppers, nooks for letter-writing circles. The archive yielded more treasures. A 60s cache from Vietnam-era WACs, coded affections in V-mail. Your garden awaits the bees' return. I wove them into workshops at the shelter site. Gatherings under tarps where attendees, runaways, vets, widows, elders with tucked-away truths, voiced their unsent. One, a wiry woman named Cora from Astoria, unfurled a tale of nursing, her lover lost to a chopper crash, buried as friend in official roles. Took me decades to name it grief, she said, voice gravel and grace. We cried then, salt mingling with sawdust, building not just walls but words. Spring uncoiled with dogwoods blushing pink, Unbound's roof sheathing complete. Tin panels echoing Vermont rains but open to Oregon light. Evelyn's letters arrived bi-weekly now, her script steadier, enclosing pressed leaves from the orchard. Theo's talking reconciliation. Come see the maples. The invitation tugged, a threat to old looms. Theo called too, gruff thaw. Mother's garden's blooming. Lila's aunt asks after you. I flew east in May solo, the red-eye a cocoon for reflections. Willow Creek bloomed verdant, the farmhouse porch swept clean. Evelyn's hug frail but fierce. You've built something, she said over tea, clippings of the shelter in her lap. Like I never could. Theo joined us evenings, his silences softening to questions. This Elowen, did she know the town's weight? I shared the journal, pages turning like olive branches, his finger tracing the lighthouse tattoo sketch. Fought her own wars here, I reckon. Mother's health held. Pneumonia a scar faded, and we walked the Black River together, her cane tapping rhythms of amends. I chose fear, she admitted by the water's murmur. Thought it was love's armor. Yours is truer, bare but bright. I left with her blessing boxed like heirloom. A locket with father's photo, space for Elowen's beside. Westward again, the plane's descent over waves felt like homecoming. Unbound welcomed its first residents that June, 3 women. A trans mechanic fleeing Portland's underbelly, a Latina vet from the Gulf haunted by IED echoes, a elder widow whose sister had passed unnamed. Opening ceremony drew a throng. Riley emceeing with sea shanties, Lila unveiling a mural of entwined lighthouses, Jordan reciting Unbound ode. Mira and I hung the plaque, in memory of Elowen Hayes. For loves that light the way, nails echoing like heartbeats. Evelyn sent a quilt from afar, stitched with coastal motifs, her note. Warmth for the unbound. Summer hummed with occupancy. Garden plots tilled to basil and lavender, evenings of fire pit circles where stories spun like smoke. Cora moved in, her V-mail framed in the common room, inspiring a letter exchange program. Pen pals bridging coasts, genders, generations. I facilitated my own replies to a young artist in Seattle weaving Elowen's blueprint lore. Lila's visits deepened, her and Jordan's plans solidifying. A joint show in fall, whispers of rings exchanged in tide pools. You're the blueprint. she told me one sunset, arm linked. For all this. But tides turn and August brought a rogue wave. A funding snag, county grants frozen over special interest audits, whispers of conservative council pushback. Riley fumed at town halls, her vet status a shield. These walls house heroes you sent to fight. Fund them or fold. Protests brewed, locals picketing with signs. Unbound for all, countered by fringes chanting family values first. Media sniffed it out, a Portland station filming the fray. My face in the frame reciting Elowen's journal. We build for the unseen, the unloved by maps. The backlash crested personal. An anonymous email to the archive, CC'd to Unbound board. Lesbian witch hunt in our Bayside? Attached, doctored photos, me and Elowen from 99, candid at the fair, hands blurred but intent clear. Sender traced to an ex-Vermont transplant, Hargrove kin perhaps, grudge transplanted like knotweed. Lila called raging. They're digging graves we filled. Fight or fold. Fold wasn't in the blueprint. We rallied. Crowdfunding surged, Riley's unit alumni donating. Even Theo wiring a check with note. For the lighthouses. September's equinox marked the storm's break. Grants thawed, expansion approved, the emailer exposed and shamed in letters to editors. Cora hosted a victory potluck, chowder bubbling with triumphs, and as stars wheeled overhead, I felt Elowen's hum in the laughter. Roar on. Fall deepened colors, Unbound's vines climbing trellises like veins of verdant hope. Lila's show with Jordan lit Portland's galleries, canvases and chapbooks twinned in themes of coastal confessions. I attended opening, Evelyn Skyping from Vermont, her face pixel bright. Proud daughter. All proud. Post-reception over craft beers, Lila pulled me aside. Jordan and I, we're eloping. Next solstice on the beach. You officiate. Tears pricked, joy sharp as shells. I'd roar the vows myself. Winter whispered in with solstice promise, Unbound aglow with holiday lanterns. Residents stringing lights that pierce the fog like Elowen's songs. I revised the blueprint one last time, adding a widow's walk for stargazing circles. Society's edicts, class cages, gender gates, wars wastes, crumbled not in thunder but persistent wave. Eroding, reshaping, revealing the shore beneath. In the cottage's hush, journal closed but heart open, I whispered to the sea, we built it, love. Unbound. Solstice sun hung low and golden over Cannon Beach, gilding the waves like a vow etched in light. The beach stretched vast, driftwood altar improvised from flotsam. Guests circled in boots and bare feet against the chill. Lila and Jordan stood handfasted by kelp cords, eyes locked as I read from Elowen's journal. In the fog's embrace we find our true north, not maps but hearts aligned. Vows flowed then, simple as breath. To weather the storms, to dance in the calm, to build unbound. Rings exchanged, bands of abalone inlay, seas shimmer, and the kiss sealed it, fierce and free cheers rising with the tide. Unbound house bustled post-ceremony, common room strung with lanterns, tables groaning under potluck bounty. Cora's clam linguine, Riley's grilled oysters, Myra's blackberry pie echoing our first Oregon nights. Evelyn joined via video from the farmhouse, Theo beside her, his toast gruff. To loves that outlast winters. Lila, radiant in linen and lace, pulled me for a dance. Slow sway to a fiddle tune Jordan had penned, her hand in mine a bridge from Vermont shadows to coastal gleam. You gave me the words, she whispered. For this. The high of vows lingered into January, Unbound expanding with a grant for art therapy suites. Lila consulting on murals, Jordan leading verse circles for residents unpacking war's luggage or love's betrayals. I curated a new archive wing there, Echoes exhibit, vitrines of letters and artifacts. Elowen's tags under glass, Cora's V-mail beside a young trans resident's zine on chosen families. Visitors streamed, school groups dissecting silences, vets trading dog tags for dialogues. One afternoon a cluster of Willow Creek teens toured, chaperoned by a progressive teacher. Their wide eyes on the murals mirrored Lila's once, questions bubbling. Was it always this hard? I answered honest. Harder in the hills but tides turn. Turn they did, but not without undertows. February brought a frost that bit deep, mirroring fractures in the foundation literal. When a storm unearthed a sinkhole under the east wing, metaphor for the cracks we'd papered. Engineers blamed soil shift, but Riley saw sabotage. Loose gravel tampered. Investigation pointed to a disgruntled contractor, fringes tied. His toolkit yielding spray cans of slurs half applied. The breach hit headlines, coastal shelter sabotaged. Hates high tide, drawing protests to seaside steps. Countered by our rally, residents linking arms with locals, signs reading build on bind not. The emotional quake rippled personal. Lila, honeymoon glow fading, confessed over coffee. Jordan's ex showed. Drama from Seattle, text accusing homewrecker. Stirred my doubts. Her voice trembled, the old spiral coiling. What if society's right? That we choose chaos. I set my mug down, steam curling like ghosts. Chaos is the cage, not the choice. Elowen chose duty over us, but never doubt. You choose truth, that's the anchor. We walked the shore that day, waves lapping confessions. Jordan joining at dusk with an apology letter, penned in verse. Forgive the flotsam, I choose our sea. They mended under madronas, stronger for the scar. My own undertow surfaced in March, a letter from the Dodi, addendum to Elowen's file. Classified reports declassified, detailing the ambush's prelude, brass decisions that sent her convoy blind into crossfire. Rage boiled, old as the tag's chill. Not just loss but betrayal by command's calculus, lives tallied like expenditures, queer medics like her deemed expendable in Don't Ask Shadows. I channeled it into a podcast series, Unsent Dispatches, interviewing Riley and Cora on airwaves that reached Vermont air. Theo guested remotely, his voice cracking. Knew a few like that in Nam. Buried truths deeper than bodies. Spring thawed the sinkhole, repairs funded by a viral GoFundMe. Evelyn's church quilting squad contributing. Their stitches a silent amends. Unbound reopened grander. Therapy suites humming with clay wheels and word prompts. Lila's mural there, Tide's betrayal, depicted waves clawing cliffs, figures clinging. Sold prints to benefit repairs. Jordan's circles birthed a chapbook, fractured foam. Proceeds to anti-hate orgs. Me? I dated tentatively. A bookseller named Wren with laugh lines and a penchant for Austen rereadings. Our first coffee stretched to walks, her hand brushing mine without lightning or shame. But Elowen's echo lingered, a gentle haunt. Live the Unbound. Summer swelled with swells again. Unbound hosting a retreat for queer vets. Riley coordinating bunks filled with stories swapped over bonfires. One night, under Perseid meteors, a participant, a Gulf-era pilot named Sloan, shared her log. Lover lost to policy purges, discharged for conduct. Elowen have punched up, she said, and we toasted to that. Lila and Jordan announced then, casual as clams. Baby on the way. Adoption papers in. Joy crashed like breakers. I hugged them, fierce visions of tiny hands in ours. A new blueprint unfolding. But August's heat wave baked old fevers. The saboteur's trial aired locally, his testimony venom. Protecting values from your agenda. Backlash flared. Pickets at the archive, eggs on Unbound's door. Cora found me scrubbing at dawn, her hand on mine. Stains wash, stories stick. We fortified. Security cams, ally networks, but the toll etched sleepless nights. Wren's concern over dinners. You're carrying the coast alone. I pulled back gentle, needing space to shore my own seams. Fall's equinox brought the gale's eye. Evelyn's health dipped again. Flew to pneumonia's shadow, and I flew east, Lila joining post-hearing. The farmhouse smelled of cider and concern. Mother bedbound but bright-eyed. Saw your podcast, she wheezed. Theo cried. We nursed her through, Lila reading coastal tales. Me singing Elowen's guitar chords soft. Theo confessed over porch rockers. Regret burying Dad's letters coded like yours. To a buddy in the core. Revelation cracked him open. We hugged, brothers in silences broken. Mother rallied as before, sending us off with a family quilt, Elowen's square sewn in. Back west, Wren waited with soup and space, our rhythm rediscovering. Unbound's holiday lights pierced early darks. Residents' kin arriving tentative then tearful. Lila's baby shower filled the common room. Onesies painted with lighthouses. Jordan's poem incoming tide framed. Winter solstice circled back, Unbound aglow, a new resident. A teen from rural Idaho, eyes wide with escape, joining the circle. As snow-dusted dunes, I stood with Wren on the widow's walk, her arm around me, stars pricking like promises kept. Society's storms, betrayals of badge and bed. Prejudices persistent as barnacles. Raged on, but we'd learned their map. Not to conquer but navigate. Elowen's Unbound whispered still. The sea gives, takes, gives again. In Wren's quiet strength, Lila's growing glow, the heart held, human heaving home. The year turned with a gentleness earned, Winter's grip loosening to hints of crocus green piercing snow. Unbound house stood fuller than ever, its halls a tapestry of tenacities. The Idaho teen Kai finding voice in Jordan's circles, her sketches joining Lila's murals. Cora mentoring a new vet intake, their V-mail exchanges evolving to emails Unbound. Ren wove into the fabric seamless. Dinners at the cottage where she debate Austin with Mira over chess. Her touch a tide steady, not surging. "You're not replacing," she said one eve, tracing my tags. "Just adding rooms." I nodded, Elowen's journal open beside us, its pages now a shared scripture. Spring birth miracles manifold. Lila and Jordan welcomed Ellis in April. A squall of a boy with fists like driftwood knots. Adopted from a Portland foster thread. The cottage overflowed for his naming. Ceremony on the beach, Kai officiating in borrowed robes. Ren cradling him as waves lapped blessings. "Ellis tied haze," Lila declared, Jordan's tear-streaked grin echoing Elowen's once. I held him first, tiny heartbeat against my chest, a rhythm of renewal, whispering, "Uncle Elowen's got stories for you." Unbound's garden bloomed that season. Residents tilling plots to kale and cosmos. Kai's hands muddied with purpose. Evelyn's visits virtual turned tangible. Summer flight west, her first, Kane traded for Ren's arm on Cliff Pass. "Smells like freedom," she breathed, salt wind tousling silver hair. Theo followed, Ellis on his knee at barbecues, gruff tales of lumberjack lore softening to lullabies. Willow Creek receded to a fond scar. Its maples mailed in syrup jars, whispers evolved to well wishes. Mother's health stabilized, garden thriving, her quilts adorning Unbound beds, stitches of amends. Lila's art surged, a solo show in Seattle. Unbound legacies, canvases chronicling our spiral. Vermont rivers to Oregon foams, figures fractured then fused. Jordan's chapbooks paired, title verses. Ellis gurgling cameo in dedications. Sales funded a scholarship at the shelter. For queer youth artists, Kai first recipient. Ren and I traveled the opening, hand in hers through galleries humming with acclaim. A quiet proposal whispered post-toast. "Build with me? Rings rooms the rest." I assented under Space Needle lights, yes, a wave cresting. Fall deep in hues, Unbound hosting its first anniversary gala. Lanterns afloat on the Black River wait. No, on a seaside cove, boats bobbing with tails. Riley emceed, her toast to Elowen drawing sobs and salutes. Cora read from her memoir draft. Coded currents, chapters forged in therapy suites. Kai debuted a mural wraparound the east wing. Waves cradling lighthouses, Elowen's silhouette subtle in the spray. Evelyn danced with Theo under string lights, her laugh light as leaves. Winter solstice gala doubled as Ren's and my hand fasting. Kelp chords anew, guests from coast to creek. Lila officiated. Ellis in arms babbling vows. Jordan strumming guitar, Elowen's ghost. In tides of trial, Lila intoned. "You chose the sea's song." Rings slid. Silver with abalone inlays matching theirs. Kiss ceiling under meteor-streaked sky. Unbound's chorus cheered. Lanterns launched like stars reclaimed. The year closed with quiet profundity. One January dawn, snow veiling dunes. Ren and I walked the shore. Tags glinting, journal tucked in coat. Ellis toddled between Lila and Jordan ahead. Kai sketching tides, Mira and Riley trailing with thermoses. Evelyn's card arrived that week. "You've unbound us all." Society's specters, class chasms bridged by quilts, gender gates unlatched by gales, war's wastes redeemed in waves, faded to footnotes, the narrative human. Mended by telling, fortified by touch. Elowen never returned from sands, but in this circle, hands linked, horizons held, she sailed home eternal. The sea roared on, unbound, and so did we. Hearts hewn from heartbreak, loving loud into the light.